The weeks following the hospital were a slow, suffocating death for their old lives. There were no shouting matches, only a cold, vibrating silence that filled their homes. Antonio's wife had made her decision. They were moving back to the province immediately. Antonio, crushed by the weight of his children's faces and the pressure of his family's expectations, finally gave in. He began packing the Nara furniture from the uncle's house, moving like a machine. He was preparing to disappear into a life of quiet regret, far away from the city and the man who had saved him. Mateo watched from a distance, unable to call. He felt the red dust of 1974 rising again, threatening to swallow the only person who made him feel alive. The airport was a sea of moving bodies and mechanical announcements. Antonio walked through the terminal like a man going to his own execution, his wife and children flanking him like guards. Every step toward the security line felt like a heavy stone being added to his burden. He checked his bags and moved toward the gate, his eyes scanning the crowd one last time for a familiar face, a sign, anything. But there was nothing but strangers. He felt a hollow ache in his chest, worse than any wound from the war. He had spent his whole life following orders, and now, he was following the ultimate one. The order to forget. He sat at the gate, clutching his boarding pass, the sound of the world fading into a dull hum. As the ground crew began preparing the tunnel for boarding, Antonio's wife took his hand, a gesture of possession more than affection. He stared at the tarmac through the massive glass windows, watching the plane that would take him away from his truth. As for a minute, the process of holding a belt, which is a suited that helps revenges described mean. As the pager was much more similar into this, and this one could. As the principal resource, he looked down, his heart hammering against his ribs. It wasn't a code this time. It was a text message that cut through 25 years of pretense. The war never ended for us. I'm at gate 4. Don't go back to the mud. Antonio's breath hitched. He looked up and saw him. The standing behind a heavy concrete pillar across the terminal was Mateo, waiting, silent, his eyes fixed on Antonio with the same steady gaze from the trenches. The intercom crackled, but the announcement felt miles away. Antonio's wife stood up, gathering their things, but Antonio remained seated. He watched the other passengers line up. A slow, steady stream of people moving toward a future he didn't want. He looked at his wife's back as she organized the kids, then looked back at gate 4. He had minutes, not seconds, but every tick of the clock felt like a physical blow. He thought about the house he had just cleared, the kiss in the dark, and the weight of Mateo on his back in the rain. He was a man who had always known his duty, but for the first time, he was weighing it against the cost of his own soul. The line at the gate was thinning, but Antonio stayed still, caught in the middle of two different lives. The final boarding call echoed through the hall, a sound that usually meant the end of the road. His wife turned back, her hand outstretched, her eyes searching his with a mix of fear and command. "Antonio, please," she whispered. Antonio stood up slowly, his boarding pass crinkling in his hand. He looked at the gate agent, who was already starting to close the heavy door, and then he looked across the terminal at Mateo. Mateo hadn't moved an inch. He was a fixed point in the chaos, a soldier waiting for his partner to make the final call. Antonio took a deep breath, the sterile airport air filling his lungs as he looked at the exit and then at the plane. The choice was right in front of him, and as he took his first step, the screen fades to black.